Hey guys, I'm Sean Hammond with PremierGuitar.com, and we're at Winter NAMM 2017 in an extremely loud hall here, talking to Bruce, and I hope Bruce can hear me. Bruce from BC Audio. Bruce, this is your first NAMM, right?
Yeah, it's having a lot of fun. It's been really good.
Good. So we've known about your cool amps for a while. We've actually got one in for a review coming up soon, but you have an even newer design that you just unveiled or announced online like a couple days ago, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's a brand new amp introducing here at NAMM, and it's the only amp in the world, as far as I know, I haven't seen another one. It's the only amp that can switch between 50 watts and 100 with a foot switch. And what that does is it gives you a volume boost for live performance. It might not be intuitively obvious to the casual observer. Well, why would I need a switch like that? Instead of on the back of the amp. Well, the way it works is it's when the light's off. This light here, it's in 50 watt mode, and 2 of the 4 tubes are engaged, the output tubes. And when you switch to 100 watt mode, the light comes on, and that's right, you get all 4 power tubes. The power tubes are EL34s, by the way, and you get all 4 of them engaged. And what that does is it doubles the power to the speaker naturally, because you're doubling the number of tubes, and that produces another few decibels, about 3 decibels. Mathematics and physics tells us when you double the power, you get 3 more decibels of sound out of the speaker. Which 3 decibels, I have to tell you, Sean, is scientifically proven. It's a consensus among scientists, really, that and global warming, that 3 decibels is the ideal, perfect amount of boost that you want when you take a solo. You want to step out in front of the mix, be heard by your audience. So, and whatever volume you're playing at, club volume, small club volume, restaurant patio, Sunday afternoon jazz gig volume, when you hit the switch and go from 50 watts to 100 watts, the amp is going from 2 output tubes to 4. You get 3 decibels of boost coming out of the speaker.
And to some people, like 3 decibels, maybe the number 3 doesn't seem significant, but it's a logarithmic scale. That's like exponentially louder.
It doesn't sound like much, but it's the perfect amount for it. It's just enough so that if it was more than that, your sound guy would say, "Oh, what's going on?" I'd turn you down, So it's a perfect amount of boost, volume boost.
So let's talk about the rest of the control complement. Is it a single channel?
It's a 2-channel amp. It's actually my first 2-channel amp. A channel switching in the traditional sense. There's two channels, 2 modes per channel. The clean channel has clean and crunch modes, and the second channel, channel 2, I call it, it has 2 modes, which are vintage and modern. And then there's 3-band EQ, presence and depth, and an effects loop on the back. And the effects loop is designed specifically for guitar pedals. You don't have to adjust levels. On some of my other amps, I have a level, send and return levels. But here it's designed specifically just plug in your guitar pedals and go.
So it's a series effects loop?
Yes, right.
Now, and the 2 channels share the 3-band EQ?
Exactly, yeah.
Now, when we came into the video, how did you have it set?
That was the crunch mode of channel 1, the gain fairly high. I rolled up my volume on it, but that was the gain set fairly high, which is a good classic rock kind of 70s tone in the crunch mode of channel 2.
Now, do you want to show us what the cleaner sound, or what was the other setting on the crunch or clean?
Yeah, the clean mode. Now, when you dig in, you can, depending on where you have it set and your pickups and setup and all that, when the gain gets above about half, you start to get into some dirt. And one of the unique things about the Grand Prix 100 is that I use these octal preamp tubes. I have one right here. I was going to
say, is that a tube in your pocket?
Yeah. Well, it's not a 12AX7. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week.
Well, it's not a KT88 either.
This is a 6SL7 GT, and it's called referred to as an octal tube because it has an 8-pin base, same base that you find on most power tubes. And these are known, these were used in the 50s, 40s, 50s, up until the time when they came out with the miniatures, which is what they were called from the factory, miniatures, the 12AX7 and the like. So this is what a preamp tube looked like, and they're known for their sweet, warm, rich tone. And I found that when you push them into overdrive, they first of all have a really smooth transition from clean into dirty. There's no sharp cutoff between clipping and not. It's just an incredibly beautiful, smooth transition from clean to dirty. And then you can push them hard. You can push them as hard as a 12AX7. They're very robust. And they give up, the character of the distortion they produce is very much like a power tube. It has kind of that power tube. Sean, when you played old amps where, before God invented the master volume, you had to turn it up. and to get distortion, and it's just a different feel. It's a different kind of, it's just so it's raw, mean.
It's the better kind of distortion.
Exactly, and these tubes kind of have that feel. It gives it kind of a more power tube, whole amp breakup kind of a sound, which comes through beautifully on the channel 1 where it's cleaner, and also on channel 2 when I'm pushing it really hard into a total modern, heavy kind of sound. It holds up well and sounds great.
Well, why don't we hear channel 2 and the different settings on that?
All right, I'll start with the vintage setting. And then I'll switch over to the modern, and I'll turn up the gain. That gain was about halfway on that. So this is the modern, and I'll hit a chord, and then I'll turn up the gain.
Sounds great, man.
So thank you. A little bit heavier, more modern sound.
Nice. Now, one thing I think we haven't talked about is, before I get to that, are there any notable aspects on the back panel you want to talk about before I start talking about the amazing wiring work you do inside, the hand wiring?
Well, on the back panel, you've got a three-way impedance selector, 4, 8, or 16 ohm selector, typical kind of thing. 2 speaker jacks, so you can plug in 2 cabinets, and then the effects loop. Send and return, as I said, it doesn't have send level and return level, so you just plug in your pedals. It will work with studio gear if your gear, will accept a lower level signal, but it's designed to work specifically with guitar level, pedal level stuff. Because most guys are using their amps that way anyway. They run a couple cables out to the pedal board, and you put your delay and reverb and stuff in the loop. It sounds better than out front of the amp usually.
Okay, cool. So now let's talk about the hand wiring on this, and we'll have Perry is going to get a shot of that in a second, but I mean, a lot of boutique amps and companies out there talk about hand wiring, and some people use the word point-to-point hand wiring the wrong way. It doesn't this is seriously point-to-point. There's no circuit board, there's no turret board. It's just incredibly neat construction inside, and I don't know how you do it.
Well, thank you. It's something that I have to thank my dad for. He's the one who told me, hey Bruce, be neat and tidy in the chassis. You'll be glad you did. Run things along parallel to the edges of the chassis. Bend things at right angles. Look both ways before you cross the street. Stuff that my dad told me. I took to heart, and I kind of developed my own style of true point-to-point wiring. And I believe there really is a difference between a point-to-point wired amp and not. It's not voodoo, it's not mojo, it's not pixie dust. What it is wire. These wires, you're gonna like this. I removed these wires. And I soldered them end to end. These wires came out of my 1967 Marshall 50-watt Plexi, and these are the wires that connect the circuit board, which is not a printed circuit board, but it's a turret board, to the rest of the amp. They connect from the parts mounted on the board to the front panel controls and jacks. They connect to the tube sockets, and I'm not even including any wires from the power supply or any DC or any even ground wires. There's 10.5 feet of wire. I strung them all together and measured it. 10.5 feet of unshielded signal carrying wire in that amp, which is really a simple amp.
And it's still a hand wired amp.
Yeah, that's still hand wired. And what I've done with true point-to-point wiring is it eliminates all this wire. And of course, every amp has wire. And what's wrong with the wire? Well, the answer is that the more wire you have in your amp, the more likely you're going to pick up stray signals, you're going to pick up hum, interference, radio frequency interference possibly. If you get one part of the circuit close to another part of the circuit, you've got a capacitor, really essentially, that you don't want in the circuit. You've got possibly unwanted feedback, positive or negative, which can lead to parasitic oscillation, instability. So when you take out all this wire, you eliminate all those lead dress issues.
So it's less about capacitance in the wiring than it is about the extraneous noise you're eliminating.
Yeah, it's all of that. There's all sorts of problems that that if you don't have good lead dress in your amps. I spend a fair amount of time on the forums, and a lot of guys will be like building a kit or building an amp for the first time, and they get squealing or instability. And the standard response from everyone is, well, check your lead dress. Lead dress is basically the science or the practice of how you run wires within the chassis. So if you get wires close to other wires that shouldn't be, you can get all sorts of problems. So the way that I do point-to-point wiring, it's a very compact and direct signal path. And so it eliminates all those, all the possibility for all those extraneous sounds. And what you're left with, in a word, is clarity. You get a clarity that you just can't get when you have 10.5 feet or more of wire snaking around in and out of your amp, connecting the power, connecting the circuit board, even if it's a turret board or an eyelet board, connecting it to the rest of the amp. It's amazing how much wire is in a simple amp like that. It's like your intestines; you only take up this much space. But if you string them out in a straight line, well, you'd be dead. But
for like 12 miles, right?
Yeah, something like that. I think that's right. Yeah, that's what my doctor said. So yeah, that's kind of one of the actual differences in sound. I think you can actually hear a difference between a well laid out point-to-point wired amp versus even a printed circuit board amp has traces on it that can have the same issues as wire in a hand wired amp.
Very interesting. I learned something today.
There you go.
I bet I'm sure plenty of people watching did too. Now, before we go, why don't you tell us a couple of things? How much is the Grand Prix 100 going for, and where should people go to find out more?
The Grand Prix 100 is $3,600, and you can order from me through bcaudio.com or through dealers that I'm working on building a network.
Sweet. All right, so what's the website?
bcaudio.com.
Okay. Well, thanks for meeting with us, Bruce. Thanks for joining us, guys. I'm Sean Hammond for PremierGuitar.com.